All right, in the meantime, I've got Alexander Smith here, America Rising PAC executive, Glenn Hall, my buddy from Dow Jones Newswires, the chief editor there, and last but not least, Deidre Bolton, Fox Business Network fame, and so much more. Deidre, the betting seems to be, and it could be very, very wrong, that something will come out of this that will not be like virtually every other trade skirmish or worse we've experienced. What do you think?
One comment that we've heard so far, which I do think backs up your point that this time it will be different, is he says we are going to invest in security, and that is more important than maximizing our profits. That's the first time I've heard anything that sounds like that, meaning they are hiring, right? There's going to be something like 10,000 Facebook employees on a security detail throughout the company, and that is going to thin their profit margins. So that line from Mark Zuckerberg found
that's a different, and that certainly eases people's concern about what happens to one important sector in the markets. But on the Chinese situation, do you get a sense that the president is really doing his best not to aggravate this situation?
I think he's sort of set himself up for some kind of success down the road, right? At least that's how he's envisioning this playing out. He set a high bar. He marked his territory. He's going to force China into discussions, and we're getting the hint that maybe China is willing to talk, although right now they want things to cool off a little bit. But we discussed this last week when the markets were going down and now they're going up. Right. It's all sentiment.
Be careful, yeah.
Yeah, we have to be careful, and I think you're looking ahead to many months before we know the answer.
Does Xi Jinping do anything overnight in this great speech that now has been, I think, too much of an onus has been placed on him here? But what do you think?
I would hope so. I mean, I think it's in everyone's best interest to avoid a trade war, certainly within ours, within China's, and certainly Europe's. And so I think that what he might do in that speech is what I hope is sort of offer some kind of concession. It's difficult because no one wants to lose their bargaining position in this case. But we've already seen that the Chinese have lobbied American businesses themselves, just gone straight to the business community in the United States to ask them to help alleviate this situation. So I think that that's what they really want, and so I hope in this speech that we'll see something like that.
I think the Chinese might be more concerned. I don't know how you guys feel about this so-called coalition of the willing that Larry Kudlow talked about last week and into the weekend with Chris Wallace and others, saying that there are a lot of countries that are sympathetic to what we're doing. They might very well be, Deidre, but they are not going out on that limb to risk alienating China.
No, and I think the difference here, we've talked about how the Trump administration was able to cut a one-on-one deal with South Korea, but that relationship is different. We have so much trust, and it's such a
And what in the end did the South Koreans agree to do?
Well, it just was kind of to set a baseline that is for free trade between those two nations, but it's not this kind of all-encompassing TTP or anything. It's just basically free trade, but we have a different relationship with South Korea than we do with China. So I think the fear, to Alex's point, is, okay, this changes because the same tricks that worked for us to get a fair deal with South Korea may or may not work with China.
Glenn, when you look at this going forward, is it your sense that the president's always arguing, I've repeated so often on this show, that the Chinese need us a lot more than we need them? So he could afford to wait it out more than the Chinese can. The Chinese are aiming for politically vulnerable issues for the president in farm states, Midwest states that he won in the election. So they've got a calculation to this. Who wins?
Yeah, well, the president is obviously concerned about that because he mentioned that if those farmers are hurt, they're going to be taken care of. We don't know exactly what that means, but he made that point today. So that's something that they're aware of and are worried about, that the implications for that. But also, he also made the point that long term, this is going to be better for the whole country. And I think the world leaders do agree that this intellectual property challenge, all of the issues related to doing business with China is lopsided. And they are happy, I think, to see the president take this on if he wins.
But they don't bravely join the fight or publicly join the fight. But I have heard, to your point, other countries saying, come on, go. You're absolutely right. They do cheat, or they're just not bravely doing it in public, right?
Well, to your question about the Midwest and the impact this could have politically on the country before the 2018 midterms, I think what's really interesting here is that, yes, China is targeting these Midwest states. They are trying to make a statement through that sort of targeting. But some of these Democratic senators in these Midwest states are in real binds. Look at Joe Donnelly from Indiana. This is a guy who stood against President Bush on a number of free trade agreements. He has been an advocate for tariffs, and now that it's hitting his home state, and now that it's an election year, he's having to soft pedal that back. He's one of the most endangered incumbents that the Democrats have.
Well, Republicans are nervous too. I could go Jody Ernst and Grassley and Sass and Thune, all of whom are concerned that this is boomeranging, right?
I think if you look at Donald Trump's constituents in this election, right, that got him into the White House, they are going to say he's fighting the good fight, and that's what he's counting on, their support in that way. You know, it's a tough calculus. You can't say that this is going to hurt the president necessarily at this point.
But I think you don't know, because if it does affect these industries and it does take money out of their pocket, and I heard him say farmers are good patriots, but you don't know if that translates for farmers into I am willing to be in even more financial dire straits to support a trading.
Well, some of them are. Now, a lot of this stuff trades on the futures market, soybeans, corn, wheat, cotton, et cetera. Those prices, pork bellies, have collapsed. Now, they were rebounding a little bit today, but my point is they're down a lot, and people forget that long before tariffs take effect, that reality is happening right now. So on paper, at least, and when they sell that stuff or try to, they're losing money, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that what the difference is between the Democratic senators and the senators from the Midwest states that you've mentioned is that the Republican senators have at least been supportive of the president's agenda and supportive in a way that the constituents of those states would be supportive of. So, I mean, whether it was tax reform, whether it was action on health care back in the fall and the late summer, you know, these senators were standing with the president. Now that the Democratic senators actually have some skin in the game in this instance with tariffs, they're continuing to stand against him, sort of in contrast to their previous positions on tariffs, and I think it's really putting them into a bind.
You know, Neil, this is a lot about what you were saying at the outset, where the president pushing blame on previous administrations, on previous members of Congress, is a way of deflecting. He didn't make this problem. He's cleaning up this problem. So bear with me, if you will.
Yeah, but I wonder, though, the way he's going about it. He's quite right to acknowledge a problem with the Chinese. I think you've reported, your various news organizations have been reporting that the Chinese do rig their markets, do rig their currency, do make it difficult for foreign firms to make inroads. So that has come to light. That's clear. Whether this is the solution, Deirdre, that's the gazillion-dollar question, right?
It certainly is. And I know that U.S. companies have until mid-May, basically, there's going to be public hearings in D.C.
Right.
So I do think for the moment, we're still in a semantics play and sort of a rhetoric play. And yeah, it is an open question. We'll see how many lobbyists show up from various industries in D.C. and say, OK, you got to backpedal or just not push so hard in this way. I think there's also other ways, if we want to, let's say, punish China, there's other ways to do it other than tariffs. I mean, I know for a fact that the Trump administration has already started to limit certain kinds of Chinese investments in this country. I mean, there's other doors that we can close perhaps more quietly, which is a little bit off, off the TV screens, but maybe are just as
I'm wondering
exactly
what is being negotiated behind the scenes. I'm hoping something is, but maybe not.
Well, and there are other levers we could go on too in our country just to stabilize the economy. I mean, I think Jerome Powell indicated in a speech on Friday that he's aware of the escalating tensions. You know, maybe this would cause the Fed to reevaluate some of its rate increases and in the very extreme of scenarios to cut rates altogether to try to preserve.
He skirted at that same little give and take there, whether, the Chinese would respond with the ultimate nuclear option, and that is just to stop buying our debt.
Yeah.
Or selling it.
Yeah.
Do you think that's possible, Glenn? Or not?
You know, we've heard that many times when we've been in issues with China. It's a lot of money to liquidate all at once, right? And there's risk on the Chinese side to go down that path as well.
Yeah, there's risk on both sides. Guys, thank you all very, very much. I'm wondering